much. I appreciate the warm intro, and more importantly, I appreciate the incredible work that Avnichin is doing in such an important field right now that not enough people are dealing with. We'll talk about that a little bit later. I really just want to start with something that occurred to me a few minutes before I came here, before I sat in front of my computer, and I was thinking to myself, over the years, I often post my thoughts from the Torah portion, the weekly Torah portion, specifically with lessons for leadership and maybe entrepreneurship. But I always find somehow that there's a relevant message in the Torah portion. And I thought to myself, what can I learn from this week's Torah portion or from this past week's Torah portion? And it really is unbelievable. And this isn't necessarily a religious message; it's just mind-boggling. The portion that we're going to read next week is Kitetse, when you go out to war. That's literally the topic of the portion. But I want to talk a little bit for a second about last week's portion, where we talk about who does not go out to war. And it is mind-boggling because it says a few different types of people that are exempt from war. One is if you built a house, but you haven't lived in that house yet. Another one is if you got engaged to a woman, but you didn't marry her yet, you don't go to war. But then the Torah says something super strange. It says, Mi ha'ish hayarei, who is the man that is fearful, v'rach halivav, and his heart is soft, yelech v'yashov leveito, go back home. What does that mean? It means a man, a soldier who is scared, who has anxiety, who is unable to perform in the battlefield and will potentially bring other soldiers down with him. The Torah says, go home. It's okay. You don't have to fight. And we understand, the Torah says, I understand, God says, I understand the real phenomenon called anxiety. This was obviously written thousands of years ago before we had modern, therapy, and we understood what anxiety was. And it's just really mind-boggling to me that the Torah kind of gives it a stamp of approval, saying, yes, anxiety is a very real thing. While we have made humongous progress in the world of mental health, I think that in many places and in many societies, it's still stigmatized and it's still not taken as seriously as it should be taken. So I just wanted to point that out, that it's mind-boggling. That's what the Torah mentions in this last week's portion. So I guess I'll give you a little bit of background on myself, and then we'll just jump in because there's a lot of things I want to cover in a short period of time. My name is Hillel Fuld. I'm from New York originally, been in Israel for 30 years. Came here when I was a kid, when I was 15 with my family. Not an easy age by any means to come in the middle of high school. At the time, I did not know what hit me. But now 30 years later, I can tell you it's the best thing that ever happened to me. Over the last 15 years or so, I've been working in the tech ecosystem. As I'm sure many of you know, Israel is a technology superpower, and I was really fortunate to get to meet some of the most remarkable people in the world over the last 15 years, and really built myself a consulting business, helping tech companies of all sizes, take their idea and turn it into revenue and turn it into a business. And that was really, I felt like I was a kid in a candy store, and the expression that they say, when you love what you do, you never work a day in your life, that was pretty much written about me because I literally just loved what I was doing every day and it never felt like work. October 7th changed that all, changed everything for me, just like it changed for many of you. For me, I had never had more clarity what I needed to do. And what I needed to do was shut down my business. And I needed to focus on Israel now. And I needed to use the platforms that I had built over the last 15 years on social media and other things to defend Israel. And so since October 7th, I've been focused on a mission that has basically two components. First one is being a source of reliable information as close to real time as possible. So I obviously am very careful what I post and what I don't post, and try to verify that it's true before sharing anything. And I'm proud to say that with very few exceptions, I've been successful at that. And then the second portion of my mission, I would say, is more inward. And this is obviously more relevant to this discussion, which is giving our team, quote unquote, a reason to get up in the morning, right? A reason to have some hope and some optimism, because we really, and when I say we, I mean basically everyone in Israel and beyond. I think the Jewish people are experiencing, a dark period, the likes of which I have never experienced, nor do I think any of us imagine we would experience in our lifetime. It's tragic and it's sad and it's really devastating. But in parallel to the physical military battlefield, there are other battles going on, and that is one, for example, the digital battlefield. But then there's the mental health battlefield, and I think, unfortunately, not enough attention is being paid to that battlefield, to making sure that our mental health now and in the future, for sure after the war, but even now, people say we're so in it, it's tough to focus on other things, but we must focus on our mental health because it is obviously incredibly important for all of us to try to remain as resilient as possible. For me, my tactic to stay as mentally healthy as possible is I do something on social media that I've never done before. And I'll tell you a quick story. Many, many years ago, I had met with Ben Shapiro and I asked him a question. I said, Ben, how do you handle all the hate that you get? Every time you tweet something, you get 10,000, hate messages. And he looked at me like I was crazy. And he said, you think I read those things? I said, well, you don't read them? What do you mean? He said, I tweet and I mute. I don't read the replies. And I said, why? He said, you think I can handle all that hate? So I remember thinking to myself back then, well, that's kind of silly. That defeats the purpose. Social media is supposed to be social. You're supposed to interact with people. And I, at the time, thought that was crazy. But now in the war, that's what I do. I tweet and I mute. And I do that for my mental sanity because I cannot, possibly contain all of the hate that I get on the internet. And by the way, it's not only on social media. I get it by email. I get it in all directions. I got to be honest. It doesn't make me happy that I can't read the replies to my tweets. I would love to engage with people. So I do go in once in a while and kind of, read the replies and see if I missed anything. But when I do that, I'm reminded why I mute my tweets, because there is a lot of hatred out there, unfortunately, for the Jewish people. And so I, again, for my mental health, I try not to read that stuff, but obviously, it seeps in. And furthermore, I lost my brother to terror 6 years ago. We're coming up on 6 years in a month. Maybe I'll talk a little bit about that in a second. But, when one experiences such deep trauma, the word trauma is thrown around a lot, right? I'm traumatized, but it has real, symptoms. It has very real symptoms. And one of those is something that I experienced, which I got to be honest, scared the heck out of me, which is selective memory or selective amnesia. I'm not sure what it's called, but basically blocking out huge kind of parts of your life because you were so traumatized. And, I remember the day that Ari was murdered. It was a Sunday morning and he was shopping for his family. I was at a startup's office and I turned on Israeli news just to kind of see what's going on. And I saw that there was a terrorist attack in Efrat where Ari lived. And there was, of course, a surveillance video on the news. And what do you do when you sit in front of a news website and see a big play button? You click play. And so that's what I did. And so I watched this video of this Arab kid coming behind this big dude and stabbing him in the neck. And this big dude then ran after this terrorist after he was stabbed. And right before this terrorist was about to kill his next victim, this big dude, who was my brother, shot him. And then my brother collapsed and died. He has since become a national hero of the state of Israel because he literally saved a woman in his last breath. A woman who had just given the terrorist lunch, by the way, who had a falafel stand there and had just served him lunch, not knowing obviously that he's a terrorist. Ari saved her life in his last breath. She has since become a part of the family. But that morning, I remember everything. I remember what socks I was wearing. I remember everything. If you'd asked me what I did the next day, I have complete blackout. If you told me that I went to the Bahamas, I'd believe you. I have zero recollection, which is terrifying, if I'm being totally honest. But when people ask me, when you found out about October 7th, what was your initial reaction? And my answer is, I don't know. What do I mean by that? I mean that, like many of us, I was in synagogue and there were rumors, the rumors were all over the place. And I was telling my neighbors and friends, stop spreading hysteria. There's no way 3,000 terrorists march into Israel. It's not possible. Stop spreading these rumors. It's just going to cause hysteria. And I remember that. Point where we were hearing the rumors. I also remember October 8th shutting down my business. I absolutely do not remember the moment that I turned on my phone and read what happened. Complete blackout. I don't remember it at all. And again, that's because I am deeply traumatized, from what happened with my brother. But the truth is that every time there's a terrorist attack of any kind, for sure, when it's a stabbing attack, it triggers me horribly. And it brings me back to that day. Now, of course, I'm in therapy and I'm doing what I can do. And, I just, 5, 6, 7 years ago, I couldn't even say those words without being embarrassed. I'm in therapy. But I don't think that that's embarrassing today. In fact, one might say it's kind of the trendy thing to do, right? Everyone's talking about their therapist. And so I'm not embarrassed to say that I'm in therapy. I'm not embarrassed to say that I'm taking meds when I need them. And, the bottom line is that it's a very real thing. It's a very real trauma. And people need to know that it's not just an empty word that doesn't mean anything. It means something, and it means something very real. So bottom line is I wanted to kind of share with you some of my thoughts about this topic. And I want to start off by saying something very simplistic, but maybe the most important thing that I'm going to say in this entire talk. And that is, it's okay to not be okay. And I just want to stick to that for 1 second and just stay with that because, all of us, we're all not okay. None of us are okay. But we kind of feel like maybe I should be okay. I have to be strong, for my kids, for my parents, for my friends. I have to show strength, and I can't show that I'm not okay. It's okay to not be okay. In fact, in our situation, given the level of just I don't even know devastation, um, I think I think it would be weird if you were okay. I think we all are not okay. Again, there's different levels, but we have to embrace it. We have to embrace it because as anyone knows, you don't have to be a therapist to know that if you don't, embrace or step up to your pain and you try to avoid it, it's going to come back and bite you. So we need to, first of all, own up to the fact that it's okay to not be okay because none of us are okay. Um, I want to share a quick story with you, and that is that after my brother was murdered, a stranger appeared at my house on a Friday afternoon and handed me a book called Option B. Option B is a book written by Sheryl Sandberg, who was the COO of Facebook and whose husband just dropped dead one day at the gym on the treadmill, just dropped dead. And she wrote this book called Option B. And basically the book is you have two options. You can either drown in mourning and, just not get yourself out of it, or you can live life. No one's saying to ignore the pain. No one's saying to sweep it, but you have to continue on. And so the book is about how to continue on. And it's an amazing book that I highly recommend everyone read. But I want to focus on one tiny little thing that Sheryl mentions in the book that was probably the thing that most resonated with me. And I think that before I tell you what that is, I think, a question of how do you talk to someone when they had just lost a loved one or, they're experiencing whatever they're experiencing. Someone dies, someone is in a car accident, whatever it may be. How do you even talk to that person? Obviously asking the question, hey, how are you? Seems like such a trivial thing to you and I. That's the way we talk. But when someone's, deep in mourning and trauma and you ask them how they are, it's a really rough question for them because on the one hand, they're not okay. But what are they going to start, drowning you in all their sorrows? So they don't even know how to answer that question. And I'm speaking from experience. So in the book, Sheryl Sandberg says something unbelievable. She said people were calling her and saying, Sheryl, what can I do? What can I do? What can I do? And she said, don't ask me. I can't make any decisions now. Don't ask me what you can do. And she said one person called her and said, Sheryl, what don't you want on your hamburger? Now that seems like a funny question to ask. What don't you want on your hamburger? But it was actually brilliant because what they were saying is, I'm not asking you what you want for lunch. I'm getting you a hamburger. Just tell me what you don't want on it. And again, she mentioned it as like a tiny little thing in the book. I doubt you would even remember that she wrote it in the book, but it hit home for me so much because again, when you're deep in trauma, the last thing you can do right now is make decisions. You can't make decisions. So if you're not going to, do something for someone, then don't ask them to make decisions. Don't ask them questions like, how are you? And, I could talk about that topic of what to say, what not to say for hours, something that, we're not going to get into this, but something that many people say is God only gives you, tests that you can pass, which I understand why that person said that to me. I understand that they meant well, but at the time when you're, suffering and you're in this deep state of trauma, you don't want to hear that because you feel like I can't handle this. What do you mean? God gave me this because I can handle it? I'm not handling this. So, again, you have to be very sensitive to what you say and what you don't say. And honestly, if you don't know what to say, maybe don't say anything at all because it really could cause more damage than good. As far as mental health is concerned, I think one of the biggest problems is that if you look at regular medicine, right, you cut your hand or whatever, you have some sort of physical health issue. You go to a doctor, they give you the medicine that you need, they take care of it, and you're good. Mental health is so trial and error. It's so, all right, let's see, take this medicine, come back in 8 weeks. The last thing that you need when you're, in deep depression or anxiety or whatever is to be someone's guinea pig. And, it's a personalized medicine is a big issue, but I think the first step really is the destigmatization, right? People need to stop thinking about this as, there's something wrong with this person because he or she is depressed or he or she has anxiety or even, things like bipolar. I think it's our jobs to try to normalize this because we all know the numbers, right? I mean, this is absolutely a normal quote unquote thing, right? The numbers, 1 out of every 2 Americans, I think, are influenced or affected by mental health. That doesn't mean they have mental health. Somebody in their family does. It's pretty widespread to the point that I think we have to start normalizing it because the worst thing that a person wants to feel when they're dealing with trauma or dealing with depression is that I'm not normal, that I'm alone. Whereas if they feel Like it's okay to not be okay. I think that's the first step, that maybe the most important step to getting help. And so I think the most important thing that we can do, and that obviously Avnei Chaim is doing and many organizations are doing, is trying to focus on it's okay. It's okay. Let's deal with the problem. Don't worry about it. It's normal. Everything's fine. Let's work on it, as opposed to what's wrong with you, right? I mean, it wasn't that long ago when I was growing up, when many of you were growing up, it was like, mental health was like what's wrong with that person, right? That needs to stop. And, another thing that I think is very interesting to pay attention to is that, again, given the level of devastation here in Israel, we also have to come up with some out of the box thinking here, because I think it's safe to say, maybe a slight exaggeration, but I think it's pretty close and pretty accurate to say that this entire country is going to experience some level of trauma, or is experiencing some level of trauma, but will for sure, find themselves in a deep state of maybe PTSD or other things after this war is over. And we're not going to send the entire country, or maybe even the entire Jewish nation, to do therapy, right? I mean, that's not a scalable or sustainable or an effective solution. And so we really do have to come up with some creative thoughts here and some creative solutions, because it's a real problem. And I know that I've spoken to many, many people whose expertise is psychedelic treatment. And I know that the government is seriously looking into this. I don't have much more information to share about that, but what I do know is obviously, pretty confidential, but it's being talked about, because we can't just, address this as if it's one person dealing with trauma. This is an entire nation. And so, like I said, the government dealing with the country, and us as individuals, we need to seriously think about how we're going to address this in our close circles, in our families, and our friends, and which leads me to another point, and that is that many of us, and I get this question probably 10 times a day from people saying to me, "What can I do?" Right? I'm in America or wherever I am. It doesn't matter. I'm in Israel. It doesn't make a difference. I'm okay. I'm okay now, and I want to help. What can I do? And there are many things, or many potential things that you can do, right? Some people fight on the ground in Gaza, right? Some people fight the digital war, right? But I'm not, here to talk about social media, but I do want to just say one thing, and it's very important, because it's a very, very common misconception that many of us feel helpless, right? We have this Facebook account with, 20 of our friends and followers, right, who are, close friends. And what's the point of me posting on my social media? I mean, it's just my echo chamber, right? We've all heard that. I just want to say one thing about that, because it's extremely important, and that is that whoever made up that urban legend was simply being dishonest, because that's not how it works. When you share something on your Facebook, even if you have one friend, and that thing that you shared is impactful and it's meaningful and it's authentic, that person shares it, you just exited your echo chamber. And so we should all understand that we have a megaphone, the likes of which we've never had, at our fingertips. And we should use that. If we're not fighting for Israel on the digital and the physical military battlefield, then we can fight on the digital battlefield. But if we can't do that, then let's fight on the mental health battlefield. And that is, just pick up the phone, call people that you're worried about, see how they're doing. And this, by the way, we had great training for this, during COVID, right? I mean, COVID, one of the horrible kind of outcomes and consequences of COVID was just people feeling extremely lonely and alone. Many elderly people or single people were alone at home for months on end. And so, if you could call someone or meet someone and give them a hug, tell them it'll be okay. Don't underestimate that, because that is something that is equally, maybe even more important than the other battlefields. And so if you can't do anything else, then do that. Pick up the phone, speak to your friends, speak to your family, check in, and just make sure that everybody is coping as best as they can, right? We've all experienced this, right? We're talking to friends. I mean, this is how the conversations start for the last, 6 months. Conversations start, how are you? I mean, I know how you are. Like, how do you even start a conversation now, given the circumstances we find ourselves? So this is uncharted territory, right? There's no user guide here. There's no blueprint on how to do this. We're all learning on the job. But again, the most important thing I think that we all can do is, first of all, embrace it. Embrace it in ourselves, embrace it in our friends and our family, and say, yeah, we're all dealing with this in different levels. And, the flame is stronger for me than for someone else. It doesn't make a difference. We're all dealing with it. Some people have anxiety, some people have depression, some people, whatever. We all are dealing with this really dark period in our time, in our life. And we have to own up to it, right? We have to admit it to ourselves, and then we can start talking about how to handle it. But, the October 7th, the events of October 7th and the war are really, in a completely mind-bending way, they're only the beginning of the trauma that we're experiencing, because the anti-Semitism, even though, again, logically, you'd think after what they did to us on October 7th, the world would stand by us. But it wasn't even October 8th when the anti-Semitism started to spike around the world, which is mind-boggling. But that's the reality we live in. And we can't ignore it, right? And unfortunately, without getting into this topic too much, unfortunately, many of my friends around the world are ignoring it. They don't want to admit it, right? They don't want to look at the data. They don't want to look at the numbers. And I tell them, listen, I'm not judging anybody, for not picking up and coming to Israel. I'm not belittling the challenges. I'm not dismissing, how hard that is. But unfortunately, we do need to look at what's going on around us, and it's not going to get better. And I don't mean to sound like, hysterical here or to scare anyone, but we know that history repeats itself, and it's time to look at history and see what's about to happen. Now, I'll tell you all the good news. Okay. The good news is that we know how this ends, and it ends well. And let me be clear before I continue what I mean by that. I do not mean in any way, shape, or form that this pain is going to go away, or that we'll forget it, or that we're going to forget the people who lost their lives in this war or on October 7th. That is never going to go away. But the reality is, as hard as it is to see now, and it's very hard to see right now, and I have to tell myself this 100 times a day, the reality is that the Jewish people have defied logic and nature. And we are here in 2024, and we celebrate days like Purim. And, I don't know about you guys, but I never really sat and thought about that, really deeply thought about that. I mean, we celebrate Purim, we get dressed up, we drink, we eat, we celebrate. It's a great time, one of the happiest days of the year. Did you stop to think for 1 second what Purim was? Because Purim, one might say, was infinitely darker than October 7th. We're talking about the leader of the world, a king of 127 countries who agreed to annihilate the Jews. We were at the end. We were done. We didn't have the IDF. We were done. And here we are celebrating, right? And Hanukkah, we were not winning that war. It was game over. And here we are celebrating. And Pesach, 210 years of backbreaking slavery, just horrible persecution. And here we are celebrating. And so again, if I had told you in the time of Purim, one day we will celebrate, you would have stopped talking to me. You would have said that is the most insensitive thing you could possibly, how could you say that, right? And that's how we all feel now. How could I say that one day we're going to celebrate? It's hard to imagine. But the reality is that we will celebrate. We will dance again. Now, again, please don't misunderstand what I'm saying. Every single life that we lose is an entire world. And again, you don't have to tell me about that. I know, I experienced it. But it is important, again, for our mental health, both as individuals and collectively, that we take a step back and try to look at this from more of a macro perspective, right? My father likes to say something that is actually unbelievable. He says that there has never been a 76-year period in the history of the Jewish people, listen to this, in which so few Jews have been killed. I'm going to let you digest that for 1 second. There's never been a 76-year period in the history of the Jewish people since the destruction of the temple in which so few Jews have been killed. Now, again, every person that we lose in this war, not only Jew, every person, every innocent life is an entire world. We also have to realize that we've never had it this good. It's a horrible thing to say right now. How could Hillel say that? We have to look. We have to take a step back. We owe it to ourselves. We owe it to our sanity to realize we're going to get through this. We're going to win this. What was will not be. Our enemies will be no more. We will not have threats on our borders. Begs the question, what were we thinking in the first place? But that's a whole different topic. There will be no threat on our borders, and we will dance again. And I want to say something else, and that is that we all know, sing, and love the phrase Am Yisrael Chai. Everyone's heard the phrase Am Yisrael Chai. And again, I didn't really sit and think about that phrase too much, other than the literal translation of Am Yisrael Chai. Am Yisrael is alive. But maybe we should think about that. What does that mean, Am Yisrael, the Jewish people are alive? It means that's not just an empty phrase. Am Yisrael Chai is a historical reality. Okay. And if you don't believe me, pick up your phone and call and look for the number on your phone for your friend who's from Babylonia. All right. Or find your friend from Assyria or any of the, of these empires who tried to annihilate. They're all gone. They're all gone. And here we are, this tiny little nation, right? That makes a tiny, tiny little speck on the map and a tiny little percentage of the global population. And we are here and they are gone. And that's what Am Yisrael Chai means. It means that we will be here. We will win this. We will forever remember our people and our sons and daughters and the horrible atrocities of that day and the war that followed. That's not going anywhere. But we as the Jewish people, we are resilient beyond nature. It is supernatural. It really is supernatural. And that's what's going to happen here as well. We're going to defeat these evil enemies, and we will be here long after they're gone. And for now, just on a kind of individual level, we all have to, again, first of all, remind ourselves that it's okay to not be okay. We have to look around us and see who might be suffering around us and just, put out a hand and give them a hug or ask how they're doing, or what maybe, if you see someone suffering, don't ask them how they're doing, just assume they're not doing well and, speak to them. Maybe even don't speak, maybe just listen. Someone once said you have 2 ears and 1 mouth, use them in that ratio. Listening is a very powerful thing that people underestimate. I think that's true in life and that's true in business, but again, topic for another time. But I think that the most important thing we can all do right now is not lie to ourselves. It's time. We have to admit it. We are all in deep devastation. Some of us in deeper, some of us less deep. And we have to get through this. We have to win this war on all fronts. And we really have to, think about our future, again, as individuals, as families, as societies, as a nation. And for that to be a fruitful, positive future, we really need to take our mental health very, very seriously. And, I guess I'll just end with saying that I've known Avnei for a very, very long time. I've known, the team for a very long time. And, they're doing incredible work. That's the real truth. And, when people say to me, what can I do to help? Or I want to donate to Israel and to a meaningful cause. Yes, there are many, many meaningful causes, many. Unfortunately, I don't think that the ones with the deep pockets, if I'm going to be a little straightforward, I don't think that the mental health issue is on their radar. I think they think, donating another pair of boots to an IDF soldier or whatever it is, all, by the way, of which are extremely important missions that should not be belittled. I don't think enough people are talking about how to support the world of mental health. And it's been said before here on the Zoom and the presentations that the mental health world in Israel pre-October 7th was a very, very difficult thing to navigate. That's obviously magnified tenfold now, given just the demand, right? And so I think it's extremely important that if someone's looking to support Israel in a meaningful way, in a very real way, I think supporting this organization, could be extremely beneficial, again, to the state of Israel, to the nation of Israel, to all of us. And I just want to say that I am, proud and honored to be a friend of the organization, honored to be here talking to you on behalf of the organization. And if you're looking to help and support Israel, then this is an amazing organization for you to support in any way that you can, by the way, in any way that you can. And, I don't know, I would imagine that no check is too small, right? I think that anything that goes into this organization will be used directly to helping someone overcome their mental health challenges as a result of this war. So thank you all for listening. I hope that I wasn't maybe too personal, too vulnerable. I just kind of wanted to share with you my experience with trauma. I'm doing my best to get past it. And if I can be helpful to anybody who's here listening or watching and you want an ear or maybe advice on how I am coping, I'm happy for you to shoot me an email or a message or whatever it is. I'm happy for the team to give you my email. And yeah, let's just remember one thing. Am Yisrael Chai is a real historical reality, and we will dance again. No question whatsoever. We will dance again. Thank you very much.